Good Friday afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing today? Got a little bit of, I guess you could call it breaking news in a sense. Nothing actually happened, but the fact that nothing actually happened is in and of itself telling. So I guess you could call this breaking news if you wanted to. I don't know. It depends on your interpretation. Nothing happened, but that in and of itself is pretty interesting. So we got the combine going on. We've got, I believe, offensive linemen and running backs doing field work today. The Seahawks have started to interview and meet with a lot of defensive prospects. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But for this video, I want to talk about the latest from Ian Rappaport. This is less than an hour ago. He had some updates on the Russell Wilson trade front. And what makes this interesting is that talk is cheap, but actions are valuable, right? So a couple days ago, the Seahawks, Wilson and Schneider came out and basically said, we're not going to trade Russell Wilson. Wilson came out earlier this week and said, I love it in Seattle. That's where I am right now. Everything that those guys said to me said, there's nothing happening right now. And it's one thing to say it, but then you have an actual action. So let's take a look at this tweet from Rappaport. How serious are the Washington Commanders in their search for a QB? Sources say they made a strong offer to the Seahawks on Russell Wilson. It didn't go anywhere. So this obviously says a few things about the mentality of the Washington Commanders front office right now. They're trying to get a quarterback, but from a Seahawks perspective, I guess the interesting thing here is the fact that the implication I get from this tweet is the Commanders made an offer and the Seahawks said no. The implication from this tweet is that it wasn't a big back and forth. It wasn't something where the Seahawks said, can you give us a little bit more and then we'll do it? And then Washington was like, I can't do it. It sounds more like the Commanders made their offer and the Seahawks said no. So if that is indeed the case, that is certainly an indicator that the Seahawks meant it when they said a couple days ago that a Wilson trade is not even a consideration right now. And I've said in previous videos and previous streams that I really don't feel like a trade is in the works, and I don't feel like it's going to be in the cards. And something like this really helps kind of hammer that home, really kind of helps make it clear that it's really unlikely it happens right now. But here's the thing. When you take a look at the Commanders and think about what that trade offer may have been, they have a fairly valuable first round pick this year. It's not amazing, but it's pretty good. Decent first round pick. They've got first round picks lined up for the next couple years after that, so those are all available in their war chest. They're not a team like the Bears that doesn't have a first round pick this year. They've got young blue chip defenders like Montez Sweat and Chase Young. I don't know about Chase Young right now, honestly. He just tore his ACL and had a really lackluster second year, but those are two guys with a lot of value in a potential trade. They have a great stopgap quarterback in Taylor Heinicke, somebody who you can hand the car keys to for a year and trust that he's going to be at least fun to watch while you figure out what you're doing long term. So the Commanders' offer, whatever it was probably pretty appetizing. You were probably looking at some combination of 3 or 4 first-round picks, however many they could have crammed in, Montez Sweat or Chase Young, and Taylor Heinicke. And if you take this tweet at face value, it sounds like Seattle got an offer like that, and they said no. They didn't go, can you throw in another second-round pick? They didn't go, how about Chase Young instead of Montez Sweat, or Montez Sweat instead of Chase Young, I guess. Or what about Scary Terry? Hey, how about that Logan Thomas guy? You want to fork him over? And then the Commanders blinked at that. This sounds more like Washington shot their wad and Seattle was like not interested. There are not that many teams in the NFL that are capable of putting together an appealing trade package on the level or above the level of the Commanders. The Giants, because they have 2 high first-round picks in this draft. The Eagles, because they have 3 first-round picks in this draft. And I don't really see anybody else that can top an offer from Washington. Some people are talking about like Tampa Bay. What's Tampa Bay going to trade? They have a low first-round pick this year. They don't have a bevy of young blue-chip players that I'd really be excited to get in a trade. Denver, they have a little bit of extra capital because of the Von Miller trade, but what kind of players are they going to be giving up? Maybe you can talk about like a Cortland Sutton, I guess, but they just gave him a big contract. I don't see it. So if we turn down the Commanders' offer, there are really, in my eyes, only 2 teams that could potentially top it. And this kind of leads into the next point that I want to make about this trade offer. For those of you who still think it's on the table, for those of you who still think it's in the realm of possibility, the combine is about halfway over. Free agency starts in a week and a half. And during free agency, teams are going to start to put their squads together. They're going to start to assemble their roster for 2022. So those teams are going to be making assumptions when they're building their roster. They're saying, okay, we know we've got this, we know we've got that, so therefore we're going to add onto it by doing this, this, and that. And I know there aren't a lot of quarterbacks in free agency this year that are appealing. Like, legitimately, the best quarterbacks in this free agency class are guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick, Marcus Mariota, Tyrod Taylor. It's not great. Unless you think you can trade for Aaron Rodgers, and that's a whole different kettle of fish. So, my point, what I'm trying to get at here, really, is that teams are going to start building their squads under certain assumptions. And if we go into the first week of free agency and go through it, and all these teams, like Denver, like Tampa, like Washington, like the Giants, like the Eagles, assume that they're not going to have Russell Wilson, they're going to be building their teams in a way that assumes they're not going to have Russell Wilson. They're going to start spending cap space that could have gone to paying Wilson if you traded for him. They're going to start acquiring players that may lose some of their value in the hypothetical situation where you have Wilson on your team. So if you don't see a Wilson trade by the end of, I would say, the first week of free agency, it's probably not going to happen. So the fact that there's been heavily implied no movement on a Wilson trade to this point, where we stand right now, early March, tells me there's not enough time to get something going here. And once you get to the draft, if you get past the draft, then it's really over. You cannot trade Wilson after the draft. Most teams that need a quarterback will have tried to find a quarterback in that draft. I know it's not a great draft class for quarterbacks, and you lose out on a lot of the potential trade value you could have gotten for Wilson because the draft's over, and you can't trade for first-round picks in a draft that already happened. You can trade for players, I guess, but the odds of that working out are very, very small. But realistically, I think the odds of any kind of a monster Wilson trade go way down the deeper you get into free agency. So you put this all together, and what I'm trying to say is that the Wilson trade, if you didn't think it was dead before, you should probably think it's dead now. And the reasons why it might be dead are anybody's guess, right? It could be simply they don't want to trade. Like Wilson's happy here, the coaches want him here, the front office wants him here. It could be that simple. But there are other theories, and you can argue that maybe those theories don't really matter, because at the end of the day, if it's not happening, it's not happening, and we'll revisit it next year. But there is some thought to the idea, this is something that the Hawk's Nest brought up in our stream last night, where maybe Wilson did request a trade behind closed doors and the team just went no. And that's the end of the conversation, because it's not like Wilson can force his way out the way... He doesn't have the leverage, is basically the way the Hawk's Nest put it last night, and he's right. He doesn't have back-to-back MVPs the way Aaron Rodgers has. He doesn't have the retirement threat that Aaron Rodgers has. If that's the case, then it does make you wonder how things are going to play out this upcoming season. Hawks Nest actually theorized that Wilson requested a trade last year, or effectively requested a trade, and the team put a little bit of work into seeing if there was anything out there that they liked, but then they ultimately just said no. And that's definitely an interesting consideration. It's something that I hadn't really thought about that much before, but given the fact that Seattle sounds like, and we'll see more next week, it sounds like they're doubling down on this idea of we're going to build the defense, we're going to keep our guys, and we're just going to run it back on offense. And knowing that Wilson has asked for things that he has not gotten, like superstars, like help on the offensive line, it does start to make you wonder if maybe that's what happened. Maybe Wilson he's not the kind of guy that Aaron Rodgers is, where Rodgers will just come out in public and say, I'm tired, I'm sick of this crap, get me out of here. Maybe he's somebody who just decides, you know what, I'm going to keep this quiet, I'm going to do this in a way that's a little more respectful, a little more dignified, and maybe that's what happened. It's hard for me to believe that Wilson would be okay with the implied direction of this organization as Carroll told it yesterday. So maybe that's what we're looking at here. Maybe it's just a situation where Wilson kind of wants to go, but the team is not going to let him go. They're going to force him to honor his contract, which he did sign, so okay. But it makes you wonder how things are going to be going forward for this relationship. All right. See you guys later. I'll be in stream on Twitch. If you're not following me on Twitch already, get over there in the description. Go Hawks. And yeah, looks like Wilson's coming back for one more year, pretty much confirmed.